Hey guys, this is Fate at Diablo3StrategyGuide.com bringing you guys another free video. And today we're going to be going over one of the higher level Inferno difficulty runs, and that is of course the Siegebreaker run. And I would say this is kind of the most popular Act 3 run both before and I would anticipate after patch 1.03. And just so you guys know, this video footage was recorded before 1.03, but I'm going to really speak to a lot of these changes in 1.03, and I think the video footage is still very much relevant to kind of what is shown in the video. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of basic changes to the patch and that kind of thing. So what are the major strengths in a Siegebreaker run? Well, simply put, the monster level is relatively manageable if you can grind through Act 3. You don't have any crazy frogs like Soul Rippers or Soul Lashers, or Phase Beasts, which were not nerfed in the latest patch. So those will continue to be extremely potent and deadly, especially for some of the range classes like the Wizard, which is what I play. The frogs, the Soul Rippers, and Soul Lashers were nerfed considerably. So those are not at all in this run, so you can completely avoid them and you're able to get some pretty high level loot. So in addition to the great loot, Siegebreaker itself is a very linear level, and this means it kind of just goes straight from start to finish, and there's actually kind of an entry point in the middle at Rakis Crossing which you can come into the run, and this is really valuable for a couple reasons. The first of which is you can fight your way to Siegebreaker very quickly and then work your way backwards, and so this means that you don't need to necessarily clear the entire level before you take on Siegebreaker, and rather you can get your 5 stacks of Nephilim Valor and kill Siegebreaker, and depending on the amount of time you can go back, kill those additional elite mobs, and get their loot. The other reason why is if you go to the waypoint or you go to the beginning portion of Siegebreaker and you run into just a ridiculous amount of monsters, which you'll actually see happens to me in this video, that you can just simply go back into the waypoint and select the other one and fight your way to the other waypoint where you'll have more space to kind of take on these monsters. So the correct way to do Siegebreaker is very simple. You're going to want to go into your quest manager, you're going to want to select the portion of the quest Siegebreaker, kill the Siegebreaker, and then proceed from there. And so kind of the levels we're going to be looking at today, this Rakis Crossing, Fields of Slaughter, and kind of the optional areas where you can find additional elites if you don't run into enough, or you just want to utilize your 5 stacks of Nephilim Valor, are the Underbridge, the Bridge Stores, both of which you can run into in Rakis Crossing, as well as the Keep Depths level 3. Alright, so let's get on to some gameplay right here. Okay, so you'll see immediately that I go down the waypoint and I run into a ridiculous amount of monsters, and I actually die right here. So you'll be able to see that in this video, and you'll see that the waypoint is just still extremely crowded even after I die. So right now I'm like, oh holy shit, I gotta get back to the waypoint, and it simply doesn't happen. So what do? I respawn and I go back in the waypoint and I just go back into that second entry point. So that's definitely one of the major strengths of Siegebreaker run, is that you don't have to restart the game or whatever if you just kind of end up with a huge clump of monsters that you aren't capable of taking on. And so we kind of fast forward here. I fight my way through the level, and here's some video footage of me killing the elite mobs. So while we watch this, I'm just going to kind of go over kind of how the mechanics of this work. So patch 1.03 hit yesterday actually, and what it's done is it's significantly affected a lot of these runs, because now the 4th stack of Nephilim Valor, which used to guarantee a rare when you kill a boss, now only guarantees a magical item. And so this means that killing bosses is simply not as lucrative. In addition to this, Blizzard also released several patch changes which improved the quality of bosses. Sedea and Gom, both in Act 3, have gotten considerably more difficult. Siegebreaker has been changed up a little bit, but I would actually say he's easier, if anything, for me personally to take on. Asmodan is also another great boss that you can do a run for, but there's a couple issues with his runs, but we're not going to go over that today. So in addition to that relatively major change that Blizzard has made, they've also, in order to improve the quality of items that people are getting, they've made it so if you get your 5 stacks and you kill an elite pack, you're guaranteed to get a rare item. So what this means is that the days of killing a boss and getting just rares and rinsing and repeating are more or less, the effectiveness has certainly been reduced. So instead, what tends to be more lucrative is staying in the game and almost clearing out entire acts, not for the bosses necessarily, but to kill the elites. And this means that kind of runs that start later in the acts and give you more waypoints and therefore more levels and more elites to kill are going to be superior choices in the future with the current state of the game. So a couple other changes with the runs that have happened is Act 2 and Act 3 monsters have simply gotten weaker. They do less damage, and when you add party members, they do even, they used to get additional damage modifiers, and they do not anymore. So this has been removed, so group play is now considerably more effective. In regards to the changes, this means that you can do a Siegebreaker run, and you don't even necessarily have to kill the Siegebreaker. This quest is kind of at the medium to slightly further past the midway point of Act 3, meaning you do have access to some waypoints. And you'll see I utilize one right here as I go into the Keep Depths in order to get my 5th stack of Nephil and Valor. And so this tactic was used obviously pre-patch 1.03, so I want to get my 5 stacks so I could kill the Butcher and then rinse and repeat. And so this, up to this point, will actually look exactly the same for 1.03, but instead of leaving the game after killing the Siegebreaker, I would now stay in the game and kind of go back to this waypoint perhaps and try to hunt for some additional elite mobs. I really like this waypoint at the Keep Depths because you are guaranteed almost all the time to run into an elite within a minute or two of actually entering the level. Now this is good because you can find an elite, and bad because you will just not have as much space to work with. So it can be a little bit of a challenge as opposed to the Siegebreaker level, which you're working with so much space that elites tend to be a little bit easier. Okay, and so now you're going to see me take on the Siegebreaker. So the Siegebreaker had kind of a couple major changes put onto him. He does go into Enrage at 4 minutes. I have not run into this yet, so I can't really attest to how strong or effective that is. And he also does reflect damage, which is a little bit annoying, but I found it very dealable with, especially considering that he does drop a couple of the healing globes during the fight now. Alright, so this is a relatively straightforward fight. You're going to want to fight him just similarly to how you fight just normal act bosses, where you kind of memorize their routine. You may die a couple times when you're first getting used to it, but once you really get used to his patterns, the Siegebreaker is a pretty easy boss fight. With the recent patch changes, I would definitely say that this is kind of the go-to run for Act 3, and if you are having issues with this run, I would definitely recommend that you go back to grinding Act 2 and doing Act 2 and doing Zoltan runs, as you dying in this patch as well kind of incurs much more significant repair penalties. So I would definitely try to avoid that. Alright, so we're just going to keep on watching. The Siegebreaker is slowly being whittled down. And just to speak a little bit more to some of the changes that have occurred in patch 1.03 and kind of these Act 3, Act 4 runs. Act 4 runs before were rare, and I anticipate they're going to continue to be rare because the Diablo fight simply takes a long while, and in Act 4 it's hard to get your 5 stacks, and there's just like not as much room to actually fight mobs. So it's as simple as that. And so I really think that this run is going to be the major run to do in the highest level of difficulties. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope it was informative. Please subscribe to us and check out our website, www.dbjs.com. Diablo3strategyguide.com. We are bringing you kind of top tier Inferno level content like this, as well as content for kind of you lower level players out there more new to the game. So please check us out, and thanks for watching.